Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Bullony Basketball. This is episode 10 of season 5, and I'm here with a very special guest, my guy Devin, also known as Run the NBA. How's it going, my man?
It's going good. It's going good.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about a lot today. Obviously had to represent for you. Got my Canada hat on, even though we probably won't be talking too much about the Raptors today. But who knows? We'll have to see. But the first thing we'll talk about is the Boston Celtics, who have just been on a tear lately. Obviously they had a statement win on Christmas against the Lakers, and they just cannot lose at home this year. There's people saying that maybe not only Jason Tatum or Jalen Brown deserve to be all-stars once again, but maybe even a guy like Derek White. Obviously, we've seen what Porzingis has done since he's come back from missing several games. And Drew Holiday still looks like he can be that defensive guy at the point guard spot. So, what have you seen from the Celtics? And do you think, as of today, they might be the team to beat this year?
I think as of today, they probably are. And that's not to say they don't have a lot of competition, because I think they do. The Bucks are looking better day by day, especially with Middleton now getting back off his minutes restriction. The Nuggets still are a very viable team, and despite Jokic not being as great the last couple of weeks, their defense not being as good, now Aaron Gordon's going to miss time. I'm still not worried about them. They're still a threat. As long as the Clippers can stay healthy, and most notably Kawhi can stay healthy, they're a threat with how they're playing right now, post-James Harden trade since that losing streak. So there's still a lot of threats out there, no doubt about it, but Boston do look like that team to beat. And like you've said, the Kristaps edition, the Drew Holiday edition, it's all been a very seamless fit from the get-go, and they just continue to look a little bit better and better as the season carries on. The Kristaps edition, of course, defensively, it's going to be impactful with his rim protection, but offensively, it's just unlocked a whole other level of spacing. I mean, any lineup that had Robert Williams starting last year evidently is going to have a lot less spacing than any lineup now that has Kristaps starting, but even still, compared to Al Horford, it's just a whole other amount of range and amount of spacing that they're getting now with him stepping out 26, 27, 28 feet and being at 7'3". It's just so difficult to contend with. And that's just opening up a whole other level of spacing and driving lanes for this team. Of course, Drew Holiday being in, we've had concerns, you and me and many others, about his offense in the postseason in the past. But that offense is a lot less important when you're the fourth or the fifth offensive option on a team. And that's what he is now in Boston. He doesn't have to have as much of a role. He can be a bit more of a facilitator. He can be much more of just keying in on the defensive end. And that's more than fine for him at this point in time in his career, and is more than replacing the departure of Marcus Smart on the defensive end, which has been great for them. And Derek White's been great. JJ Redick, of course, has been pushing those all-star narratives, and fair play, because he's been playing very well. All-star might be a bit of an extension, but he's been playing great. Elite tier defender, all-defensive team candidate, no doubt, at this point in time in the season. Great shooting, has just continued to get better and better from someone who was considered a relatively average to slightly under-average shooter before he arrived in Boston to now being a very great three-point shooter. They're just firing on all cylinders right now with that starting five when they're healthy. Key thing is going to be A, health, and B, can that bench unit continue to be viable? We know Horford's going to be fine. He's not quite as good as he was last year. He's not quite as he was the year before that, but he's still good. Can you just continue to get a little bit from Sam Hauser? Can he continue to shoot well? And can Peyton Pritchard continue to be at least decent? He's had some good moments this year. He's had some really tough moments this year. That's really the only two questions, but those are pretty two slim questions considering some of the questions around these other teams in the league. And I mean, that starting five is just ridiculous. They're going to be really difficult to contend with. And as of today, I think they are the team to beat.
Yeah, and I think even the biggest reason why they might be the team as of today that's sitting atop the rest is just because not only they're starting five, but it's I feel like guys like Peyton Pritchard, like you said, and then also Sam Hauser, those two have really kind of stepped into big roles. And granted, sometimes they have really bad games, but there's also been, I believe there was a game this year where Sam Hauser hit 7 threes or 8 threes in it. And then there's another game where Peyton Pritchard had 20 or 25 points. If you have those guys who can do that, and then you got four other guys who we've seen average 20 points per game multiple seasons in the starting lineup, and then another guy like Derek White who can kind of be a jack of all trades type of player, it's going to be tough to beat. Now, The one thing I will say, though, is, and you brought up a good point, too, with Drew Holiday, as we've said in the past, like, I've said it, you've said it, a few other people in the community have said it, like, just him in the playoffs offensively hasn't quite been what you'd expected. And granted, yes, he is probably more so like a fourth option with Boston right now. However, I think you probably don't know if you have as reliable of options ahead of him as you might have had in Milwaukee. You know, having a healthy Giannis was going to show up basically every single time. And especially that championship run Chris Middleton did as well. But now you're playing with a guy like Tatum and Brown who will show up most of the time, but they have had their lapses. And also a guy like Kristaps Porzingis, who last time we saw him in the playoffs, I mean, Mavericks fans were slandering him like crazy. So I think that's the only concern I will say with that. But if, you know, they get into the playoffs and they can find the right groove, because I think that's kind of the biggest thing, then it probably won't be as big of a problem as some of us think it will be. But as of today, I would probably agree they are the top team. Now, once April hits, I still probably believe in a healthy Nuggets team and probably have more faith even in a healthy Milwaukee Bucks team than Boston. But I think they're probably that third team, I would say.
Yeah, I don't hate that. I think the biggest thing for Boston, and it's been that way for the past couple of years, is just whenever they get in that rut where they get a little bit too happy with three-point shots, especially if they're not off good ball movement, that's when it becomes a bit of a problem. And that's going to be no different, even more so this year in the postseason, because now that you have Kristaps, you have that extra spacing, you have an extra guy who can hit threes, but more so off the catch. As long as they don't get stuck in that stagnant mode of step back three, sidestep three, especially from Tatum, but JB can be bad for it. The whole team can be bad for it, and they really get stuck in that rut. That's their biggest issue. They can avoid that. I think they're in a better spot with this year's roster than they've probably ever been to have success.
Yeah, and I think you even said it too at the end of your other point. Just they need health too, because like last year, like I think Game 7, Tatum gets hurt. I mean, Brogdon was hurt. Robert Williams was hurt. Like all the years, like they can just have a healthy team and put it together. I mean, they made the finals the one year when they started off horribly. Then they went on a run the second half of the season, and they really didn't even have a completely healthy team in that playoff. So we'll have to see what happens. But yeah, I don't know if you want, we can move on here to the next topic. Talk about something that happened on Christmas. And I know I've talked about it before, but kind of more so a different angle on it, and that being the NBA referees. Because on Christmas, the Warriors played the Nuggets. The Nuggets won. Jokic had a pretty horrible shooting game. I think he only made like 2 field goals, and he shot like 20% or something like that. But he still had like 26 points or something like that too. So to make 2 field goals and 26 points, it's like, well, what happened? Well, obviously the free throws happened. And I think, like, obviously Steve Kerr took it to the media afterwards. He was not happy, saying that, the way that these referees, that we're teaching them or something, it's just not right, and it's ruining the game. He's kind of said stuff about this before, but what do you make of this by Steve Kerr, and do you think there's any validity in it?
I think there is some validity. I mean, he approached it from a standpoint of it's been not necessarily gradual, but it's been a process over the last decade and a half of whether it be rule changes, whether it be directives from how they want refs to officiate games. It's been a combination of the two, but slowly but surely we have had a transition where it has been much harder to defend legally without fouling, and it has been much easier to bait defenders into fouls. Now, part of that is just the skill is continuing to improve in this league. The offensive talent is getting smarter, and they're just learning ways to manipulate the game. But part of it is that back end of what are the rules and how is it being officiated. And like Kerr said in that clip, for the most part, although there are some criticisms, refs do a relatively good job in this league. A lot of the criticisms that you'll get on Twitter or elsewhere is on what is being called a foul and not that the refs are calling such thing a foul or not a foul. It is more so in the fact that Trae Young or Joel Embiid or whoever it may be is getting to the free throw line on 14, 16, 8 attempts a game, and it's not just being in the post and getting fouled. It's these soft knick-knacky fouls in the mid-range on Joel's shots from the elbow or Trae Young baiting a guy at the three-point line, and they have done better with it. It's not as bad as it was 3-4 years ago before they really changed that rule a little bit. And you had the leg kicks and guys fully jumping into players to bait fouls. So it has been better. But compared to even the mid to late 2000s when some of the hand checking rules got changed, it's very different. And there is very much an elimination of defense in that regard. So I get what he's saying. I think part of it is just that these offensive players are getting a lot more talented, a lot more smarter, and they're just working their way around the rules. And I think the league is okay with that to a point, but it's just keeping that balance of changing rules to make offense that the casual fan does want more than what they would typically want compared to a great defensive team. I mean, if you're a casual fan turning it into a game, you probably don't want a 90-90. You'd probably rather a 120-115 game, but you would rather that 120 to 115 game be a high-pace offensive game and not a free throw heavy offensive game. So That's the balance they probably need to keep. But outside of that, I think there's a lot of validity to what Kerr is saying. And I don't hate where the league's going with it. It's just about keeping that balance.
Yeah, I agree. I think there definitely is validity to what he was saying. Now, obviously, the timing of it looks bad because, obviously they had chances that they very well could have won that game and it just kind of let it slip, especially near the end. But what I will say is that, at least for the referees, like, I feel like, as you said, they're putting in rules to stop, people like getting their feet under there, or, as like we talk about like this play with Zaza Pachulia on Kawhi, and that really kind of changed like the landscape of, the way those fouls are called and moving forward. Obviously, like the, fouling just to, stop the play and stuff like that, like those sort of things. But I don't know, and it would be nice if we did know, like, just how it is behind the scenes and, like, some of these new up-and-coming referees, and, like, it almost feels like maybe sometimes they need to make a call, like, to make it, like, I saw that, you know what I mean? Like, so it's like, I'm aware of this, like, I know, like, what we talked about with this, like, behind the scenes, and I'm calling this so that, like, maybe the crew chief knows, like, that I'm paying attention to it. But in reality, like, it might not be a foul. Like, I think there was one that was kind of a good example of it in the game there was the other day. I don't know if you saw the end of that, the second Pelicans Grizzlies one, and like Valanciunas got called for a foul, but Jaren Jackson kind of just jumped up. They couldn't challenge it because they'd already won both challenges. Wasn't even close to the play, but because Jaren Jackson fell down, even though he wasn't under his like landing space, like they called it. And so it's like you're paying attention like to that and thinking like if you're in the landing space, that's definitely a foul for sure. But he wasn't, and it was just like that was the end of the game. Like he just had to get it up quickly. So I think like there's times like that where it's like the refs need to be better and they just need to be more like alert, Like as you said, the pace of the play today is higher than it was like 10, 20 years ago. So when people were scoring on average maybe 100 points a game, it's going to be higher regardless. But it's not like, unless maybe you're a player like a Joel Embiid or an SGA or a Trae Young or Jimmy Butler or something like that, like most of these guys, I don't think like manipulate it quite as much as people think. Even Bam Adebayo said himself, like I think it was yesterday or the day before, like Jokic isn't one of those guys who really does that. Like he might try to sell a call, but he's not going to like try and like throw himself like into you to try and like just get to the free throw line as much. So I don't know. That's just kind of like how I see that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you saw the bit more of that a few years ago when there was some of that with Trae. There was some of that even with DeMar on mid-ranges and stuff like that. But there's a lot less of that these days. A lot of it is just players being smart pump fakes and getting guys to bite, noticing contact and going up at the right time. It's much more about being smart and making natural basketball plays for the most part than it is guys throwing themselves into other guys or doing anything absurd that just doesn't look like a natural basketball move that we were getting 3-4 years ago. So it has improved a lot there. I think they've done a better job of dealing with that, and the players have responded accordingly. And that's all you can ask for is implementing the rules to keep it right. So there's still some fine tuning to do, like you say, but as long as they keep that balance, I think they should be okay.
Yeah. hopefully it can, stay good moving forward. And yeah, I mean, other than that, though, if you want, we can progress here, talk about the next topic, that being a player who I think has been playing really well last several weeks. We already know how great he is, but he's kind of been taking it even to a whole nother level, and that is Luka Doncic. And I think the recent ladder has Joel Embiid as the MVP frontrunner. And there's been guys as well like SGA, obviously Jokic, Giannis, like all these guys that are having great seasons once again. But, Luka Doncic, he's in year 6 now. And I think we're all kind of just like waiting for when he's going to win the MVP. Things look promising for that MVP award, not like certified, but I think it's promising as of now. And so, like, what chance would you give Luka to win his first MVP this season?
I think this is probably the best shot he's had. And even still, I don't know that his chances are that high. He's been brilliant. Like you said, he's been absolutely brilliant, especially over the last week or two. He's taken it up to a whole other level. And the biggest thing that's going to help his case this year is, at least so far, the Mavericks look like they're going to hover around that top 4 seed range, which he's probably going to need because Embiid and Philly are probably going to be a top 3 seed out east. Giannis and the Bucks are probably going to be a top 3 seed out east. And Jokic and the Nuggets are probably going to be a top 3 seed in the West. So those are your 3 guys you're probably fighting with. If Shea gets thrown in the conversation, OKC are in the top 3 right now as well. So he's going to have the Mavericks stay up in that top 4-5 seed at worst range to probably be in that type of conversation. And that's not a given, but at least they're there right now. But it's still going to be tough because is he going to get in the top 3? I don't know. And those other guys probably are going to be. And even still, I mean, Jokic, barring the last week or two, had been playing very elite basketball and was probably my MVP pick up until that point. Embiid has just been ridiculous and has seemingly got even better this year, which didn't really seem like something we were predicting after an MVP campaign last year, but that just seemingly seems to be the case for him this year, playing with higher pace under Nurse and Maxey now being the guy running the offense with Harden gone. So he's going to be a tough candidate to beat. Even Giannis has continued to turn it up since the first month or so of the season, with the Bucks starting to figure it out more and more. So he still has really tough competition because that top 3 that's been the top 3 in the league the last 2 or 3 years, they're still going at it, and they're probably not slowing down anytime soon. So like you say, Luka's going into his 6th year, but it's tough for him to break into this conversation right now because there's just 3 such elite talents in Jokic, Embiid, and Giannis. Their teams are elite. They're still elite. They're going to be in their primes for quite a few more years still. So it's going to be really tough without the Mavericks really making that jump and saying, we're a 1 seed. We're that elite team in the West. Or maybe they make another deep playoff push and people start respecting him a little bit more, and that helps his narrative. But as of right now, I don't know if he has enough narrative backing behind him to beat out the talent of an Embiid, or if Jokic and Giannis keep stepping it up even more. But he keeps playing the way he has the last couple of weeks. If the Mavericks somehow slip into a top 3 seed, I think he has a chance. I think this might be the best chance he's had, just because the Mavericks aren't sitting down in that play-in battle range as of this point. That needs to remain that way. But outside of that, if they start to slip, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I feel like, as of right now, like they're currently in 6, and really if they won against the Cavs the other day, which they should have, like they'd be in 4th. Which I think, like, being a top 4 seed, especially with how, Luka's numbers look, like he was in the MVP talks like legitimately last year, up until, around the trade deadline. Once they got Kyrie, then they started to slip. But what I will say for his chances this year is, I think statistically you could make an argument that he's putting up maybe better numbers than anybody else in the league. Maybe Joel Embiid might be a little more impressive just because, like, the dominance in scoring and just how few minutes he's doing it, just his overall net rating. Like, those are the things that I think are huge in his favor. But aside from that, like, I'm looking at, like, some of the guys that you mentioned, like Giannis, like, more than likely is going to have Dame alongside him in the All-Star game. These are 2 of the top 15 players in the league probably. And same thing maybe goes for Embiid and Maxey. Jokic probably won't have anybody on his team, but I think when we look down the line at, like, the Nuggets, it's like you got a guy like Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., KCP. I just feel like they have a more well-rounded core around Jokic, whereas, Dallas, a lot of it is kind of on Luka and Kyrie's shoulders, and Kyrie has missed a lot of time recently. Granted, I think, he'll be back in time, but I think that because of the time he's missed already, and I feel like that might hurt his chances to make the All-Star team. So we're probably looking at another season where Luka is the only All-Star on Dallas, and if he leads them to the top 4 seed and he's playing the way he's played, I think there's a realistic chance. I think also, a guy like SGA has been getting a lot of noise too, just because the Thunder are a top 2 seed. I what I would say to that is that, like, even though he probably does more on the defensive end than Luka, I do think that probably he has a little bit more of a well-rounded cast than Luka as well, which might seem crazy because you could argue his second best player is a rookie, or a technically rookie. But I don't know. I think, like, at least with what Luka's doing, do I have him as the favorite right now? No. I would probably say, based on what we've seen, I think Embiid has been, like, the leader for the MVP, so I think the latter has that right. But I don't know. I think that he has a chance to do it if he keeps playing well, and especially, like, if they don't, like, end up making, like, another drastic move to, like, bolster, like, their wing depth, or, like, they're relying as well on a rookie at their center position in Derek Lively. So I think, like, these are things you have to factor in for a guy like Luka, who made the conference finals a little bit over a year ago, right? So I don't know. I think he has a good chance. He's not my favorite to win it, but I think he very well could. As you said, it's probably his best chance that he could win it.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a chance. I'm glad you brought up SGA, though, because the media loves SGA. They just do.
Boy, do they.
I think it's going to be very tough for Luka to get properly in that MVP conversation if OKC remain like a top 2, top 3 seed.
Yeah.
And Shea's still that guy, because they're just, I can already see it. The media is just going to be like, okay, Shea is officially above Luka. And it might only be by 1 spot, but it might be the difference between, like, Shea being at 4 and Luka being at 5 or something to that extent. So not to say that that's how it should be, because I agree with a lot of the points you made. Like, there is a much better supporting cast in OKC. They're shooting the 3 really well this year. Chet's been great. Shea Dowd is making the step to being a star. Like, there's a lot of great pieces there. Whereas Dallas, it's, with the time Kyrie has missed, mainly just Luka. And even some of that really good 3-point shooting from the earlier parts of the year has really fallen off. I mean, Derek Jones Jr. started really hot. That's cooled down to a little bit more of what you'd expect from him. Grant Williams started the first week or two shooting really well, and he's mainly been shooting very bad since then, and since has been spending a lot of time off the bench. So it's definitely a scenario where you would think the narrative should help Luka, but Shea is Shea in the media's eyes, and I don't know if that's actually going to be portrayed accurately.
Yeah, I mean, Shea is great. There was actually, it's funny because, I feel like, I don't know, like, I think I came on, like, your guys' show, and I was giving praise to Shea. It's funny because, like, I was on board saying he's one of the most overrated players in the league a couple of years ago and stuff like that. And, he kind of proved me wrong because I didn't think he'd ever be this good. What I will say, though, is I still feel like Luka does a little bit more for his team, even if he's not quite the defender that Shea is. I just feel like, OKC has maybe more options they could rely on from an offensive standpoint to compete or get things done. Without Luka, the Mavericks, they almost seem lost. There was even a game, I think, this year when Luka didn't play. It was maybe against the Clippers, and Kyrie did or something, and they got, like, destroyed or something. I don't know. But if you want, though, we can move on here. We can talk about Luka's former teammate, who has been playing really well as well this year. Granted, last year they were a 5th seed. Currently they're sitting in 7th, although they're not too far behind. But I think, what Jalen Brunson has been doing, a lot of people are saying that maybe this is the year he finally makes the All-Star team. A lot of people thought he would last year. I thought I've really always thought he was the best player on this Knicks team. No offense to Julius Randle, but I just feel like Brunson is that guy. And so I'll ask you, there are some guards in the East, but do you think this is the year that Jalen Brunson makes his first All-Star team?
I think he does. Last year he was on my ballot too. So he's been in this eye for me for the last couple of years now as being deserving of this. And ultimately, I think there's 6 guards making this team because I think there's 6 guards that are going to be better than forward 7 and 8 that would make it as the wild card spot. You could argue that with depending on who does get left off, whether it's a Bam or a Jimmy or a Scotty Barnes or a Paolo, Randall. There's a lot of good talent there, but I think there's 6 guards who do make this team. Maxey, Halliburton, Dame, and Donovan Mitchell are the clear 4 to me. Those should be the 4 locked-in guys, but I think Brunson deserves one of those spots. He's just too good. Like, he is, like you say, in my opinion, the best player on this Knicks team. He's the engine that drives it. He's their primary playmaker. He has been ridiculous over the last couple of weeks in terms of his scoring production as well. Started a little bit slow, but that production and efficiency has just gotten better and better. So he's deserved it last year in my eyes. I can't see a way that he doesn't make it this year. Like you say, the Knicks are the 5 seed right now, or were the 5 seed last year, 7 seed this year, but they're a good enough team that they're going to get at least one all-star. And Julius Randle's been very good, but Jalen Brunson's just the best player on this team. And I can't see a way where he doesn't get on. For the record, Trae Young would be that 6th guard, but you can make an argument either way. Point being, Jalen Brunson should make the all-star game.
Yeah, I think, I'll ask you something about your 6 here in a sec. But I guess first to talk about Brunson, as you said, he's kind of like the motor or like the engine of this team. Like, without him, it almost feels like the offense is kind of lost, disoriented. And, I got to give, credit. There are guards on that team off the bench. Like, when Quentin Grimes is there, or Emmanuel Quickley, when he is inserted into that role, sometimes they have games where they can do a little bit of that. But I think Brunson just kind of controls the pace a little bit better. And not only that, but he brings out really the best in Randall. And that's why I've always said, like, when they've been together, like, Brunson is the best player on this team because he's not only making himself better, but I think he's making Randall better, maybe to an extent even RJ Barrett. He just overall like kind of controls the pace, I think, at a really strong level. And, as you said, at maximum, there could be 6 guards that make it in the All-Star game. And I think, definitely, as you said, Dame will make it. I think Maxey will make it. Donovan Mitchell will make it. And, I think Brunson will also be in there, and Trae Young. And I want to ask you, did you say Halliburton would make it too or no?
I did.
Okay. I must have missed that because I was just looking back at it, and I'm like, who is the 6th guard? I'm like, maybe he did say Halliburton. But, I think those are probably the 6 guards. The East front court is just like, it's just a little bit weaker. I don't really see more than like the main 3 off the bench making it. So you'd probably have 6 and 6 of each. It's just a little bit tough, but I think the Knicks, currently sitting in 7th. The only thing I would say about that is that because the front court depth is so weak in the East compared to the guard depth, that Randall has a higher chance to make it. And if Julius Randle does make it and they're still sitting in 7th, I could see them saying, we're not going to give 2 All-Stars to a 7 seed. And that almost felt like that's what happened a little bit last year because I think they were sitting in they were below the Nets last year at that point because they still had, Durant, and Kyrie for most of those games. So they were like, I think like 6th or 7th with like the Heat or something. Same thing. And Randall made it. Brunson did not. So that's the only thing I would say. I hope it doesn't happen though because Brunson's a more deserving All-Star than Julius Randle.
Yeah, I'd agree. I hope that's the case. Randall does have an argument for one of those forward spots, which does make it dicey, but we'll see because Bam's got an argument. Butler's got an argument for one of those spots. Performance-wise, you could argue one of them don't get it in, but I think Orlando should get an all-star, whether that be Paolo or Franz. You can make an argument for either. Scotty Barnes is going to have an argument too, although record of the Raptors is very much going to impact that in a very negative way. So there's an argument that Randall does squeak in, but I hope for Brunson's sake that it doesn't, because after both of these seasons, if he doesn't have an all-star nomination to his name, that is going to be very tough.
That will be tough, especially because not only that, but no All-NBA last year, wasn't most improved. Like, he really had such a great season last year and didn't really walk away with like any achievements, Like, it feels like something needs to happen this year. Like he's deserved it. It's a little bit, I guess, like Jamal Murray-esque. Granted, now he won the championship last year, so he has that to his name. But like, this is a guy who we know is better than what the regular individual accolades might say. So, yeah, I don't know though. If you want, we can move on, talk about the next topic, and that is the Los Angeles Lakers, who won the in-season tournament. They hung up that banner, I guess, and it's not been looking good since. They have gotten, a couple wins. They got a big win against OKC. They did win against the Spurs, even without LeBron playing. But then also losing to the Spurs when LeBron came back, losing to my Bulls, losing to Minnesota, and then obviously the Christmas Day game against the Celtics. And some of those games just did not look good. I think they're 4-6 in their last 10, and I think they're like 2-6 in their last 8. What do you make of the Lakers right now, and how did they snap out of this funk?
They're in a weird spot, and they're trying to change a few things, evidently. I mean, Reeves moved to the bench earlier in the year. Now they're trying to get D'Lo in a better situation and improve their starting lineup a little bit. And Vando's back now, so they're trying to get him back involved. But the biggest thing has been that, thankfully, he's been healthy, but they have been very, very reliant on AD defensively. And he's been great, which has been the only reason they've kind of been staying afloat on that end. But they've been struggling there. There's a reason they moved Reeves to the bench, and there's a reason why D'Lo has seen time on the bench now, and Jared Vanderbilt's been into the starting lineup. So they're trying to find some answers on that end. Offensively, there's still been flashes. I mean, LeBron's still been playing fine for the majority of this season. Reeves has had some decent games off the bench over the last couple of weeks compared to what he was doing in the starting lineup. AD's still been doing his thing for the most part. Again, though, he's having to do so much on the defensive end. So that offense, at times, you're not getting what you need because he is exerting so much on that end. So they still got some things to figure out. They got some pieces that they need to incorporate into their rotations and how they're going to balance these rotations with Vando coming back with Reeves and D'Lo, and how they're going to balance those guys playing relatively poor on the defensive end and making sure they don't have lineups where they're both out there and they're just getting completely exposed. Of course, Gabe Vincent is now missing time again after missing the majority of the start of the season. So that's not helping them any bit either. So they got a lot of things to figure out from a rotation standpoint. They got to figure out what's going to work to give AD some help on the defensive end, because ultimately we know AD is probably not going to play a full 82. I hope he does, but I saw you tweet out either today or yesterday, like, dude's been very healthy over the last little bit. And are we going to really rely on that? I don't know.
He missed one game, I think, so far this whole year. But oh, go ahead, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically the end of my point. But like, that's pretty darn impressive for AD. Hope it continues, but they need to figure some things out, especially on the defensive end, that don't rely on AD before he inevitably misses a 5, 8, 10 game stretch. Because if they do, they might only win 1 or 2 of those games without him, the way their defense is looking and how they're relying on him right now.
And you know what it is? It's like, I feel like with the recent lineup change, moving D'Lo to the bench, they kind of have LeBron at point. The last time we really saw LeBron at point was the year that they won the bubble championship. And like, what I would say about that is that, well, first of all, you're putting a lot of pressure, in the starting lineup. You're giving AD some support, but granted, it's like, now when you take some of these guys out, the bench defensively, you're going to be compromised a lot, because you have like, Cam Reddish in there getting big minutes with the starting unit and stuff like that. But you got guys like, D'Lo and Reeves coming in later. But I feel like you need to put a good mix of that together. And I think that's maybe why some Laker fans are mad with Darvin Ham, on top of the million reasons why they already were upset with him. But I think like just with that, like you said, AD has been pretty healthy. Hopefully for their sake, he can stay healthy. It's just hard to bank on it when we know the recent history. I mean, even with Kawhi, Kawhi had played every game this season, and people were like, do you really think he's going to play every game this year? Now he's missed the last 3. So like, I don't expect AD to play every game the rest of the year. I think there was a stat said like 78 of the last 82 games, including the playoffs, is what he's played. But My thing is too is that like if they're trying to replicate what they did in the bubble, it's like, well, they also had pieces in the bubble that made them, or the bubble season that made them one of those top tier teams. Like they were still a respectable 3-point shooting team that year. Right now they're like bottom 10 in 3-point percentage in the league, so they're like I think they're like 21st in that, and I think they're like 28th in 3-point attempts or somewhere around there. So like that's more than likely going to be hard to overcome, especially when defensively, granted, you guys have definitely picked up from where you were 2 seasons ago when you had that horrible aging super team that you guys assembled, but it's still not even quite where it was that year. So your defense is taking a little hit, your offense is taking a little hit, and some of these other teams have gotten better. So it's just going to be hard to see where they fit in. Is this like the end of the world? Are they going to miss the playoffs? No. But I just think like it's going to be, now especially that they won the in-season tournament, people were saying, well, there's going to be a target on their back. And I don't think they've been kind of ready for it. I think even LeBron alluded to that too. And after like one of the games recently, I think it was maybe the Bulls game actually. But either way, like I think like that's kind of like where they need to fix their wrongdoings a little bit, because it hasn't been working, and it's like seems like Darvin Ham is kind of like grasping for straws to try and figure out where to go from here. Like it's just I don't know. We'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, they're definitely in a spot where they are understandably grasping for straws, and hopefully they can figure it out. But a team that is very reliant on a injury-prone player to keep their defense afloat, and a team that is not shooting well in 2023, it's a problem. So hopefully it's something they can resolve. I think the personnel speaks to a team that can be a little bit better from three-point range, but it's not a team that has the personnel to be a good to great three-point shooting team. That's just not there. So there's definitely some limitations within this roster that they're just going to have to work through and try to maximize their strengths. And that's never going to be three-point shooting within this group. It's going to have to be honing in on that defensive end and making sure that they can be as good as they can be and just be passable from a three-point shooting standpoint, be a decent offense. That's where they need to lie their cap on, most likely, if they're going to have any level of success. Vastly different roster, but it's still LeBron and AD, and that's what gave them success in the bubble, and that's what got them a chip. It was that elite defense, and granted, better shooters, but still, it wasn't a great offense. It was a good one, but it wasn't a great offense, and that's probably something they're going to have to try and emulate again this year.
Yeah, I'm sure the GM will be in his bag, as the trade deadline approaches. Seems like he always is, but yeah, if you want, we can move on here. Talk about, a team who, even though the Lakers haven't been great, at least we can say they've been better than one team for sure, and that is the Detroit Pistons, who officially made history with the longest single-season losing streak in NBA history. With at least, they have 27 losses. We're recording this on Thursday, so they're going to play the Celtics tonight. I think we can chalk that up as 28 losses in Boston too, where they haven't lost. So it brings me a question where, and I know this team didn't have the longest losing streak ever, surprisingly, but they are the worst team in for a single season win percentage wise in history. And so now, I think it's funny because obviously like Gabe, who's on 3 Point Weekly with you, I saw he just put out a thing saying like, the Pistons, I'm most intrigued with them now because of just, are they going to win a game finally, right? So I think like we need to ask the question, are the Detroit Pistons officially worse than the 2012 Charlotte Bobcats?
It's close, man. It's close. But look, there's a lot more talent in the league even than there was a decade ago and the decade before that. But especially where we are in the league today, this Pistons team, at least individually, might have more talent than that Bobcats team. Now, the fit on this Pistons team is absolutely atrocious, and that's a lot of the reason why their problems have been the way they are and why they've lost 27 in a row. Part of that's been injuries as well. Of course, Duran's been in and out of the lineup. Alex Burks has missed time. Bojan had missed a good stretch to start the year. So they've been without some key guys, but at least there's some individual talent here. I mean, Cade, although he did have some struggles, especially from a turnover standpoint earlier in the year, he's still a very good player. Bojan, of course, missed time, but we know what he can do on the offensive end as far as his scoring goes. But the fit is terrible. There's no spacing. There's no shooting. The rotations have been a mess. I mean, it's been a criticism all year from Pistons fans and non-Pistons fans alike, with Jaden Ivey minutes, with Asar sliding off to the bench after the first month or so of the season at times. So there's just been a lot of other issues in Detroit. But I think there's enough talent here to say that they are better than that Bobcats team. I mean, the Bobcats team was hoping a rookie Kemba was going to carry them, which he was fine, but he was a rookie, and he's a small guard rookie, and more often than not, we know where that leads. And Corey Maggette was just, I mean, he was not playing well at that point in time in his career. Let's just say it as it is. Great player, but not at 32 in 2012 with the Bobcats. I mean, this was still before Gerald Henderson remembered or even knew how to really hit a consistent three in the league. Still a fine scorer outside of that, but like it was a team that was led by talent that was not meant to lead any competent form of an NBA roster. Cade can be that. Bojan as a secondary option can be that right now. It's not even a situation with Kemba where he was going to be that, evidently, as we saw throughout his career. But as a rookie, that was not a role that he was ready to have. So it was a bad team. And I don't think the Pistons have quite been at that level. The combination of how all of these pieces have fit together has made it really bad for them. There's been a lot of problems with the coaching as well. I think once they get a little bit of health going, especially with Jalen Brunson, who's been really in and out of the lineup, he's been a key piece that they've missed and really impacts their defense, which has been, although the offense is really bad as well, the defense has also been very much lacking, and Brunson will help that a lot. And I think that'll be a big help to them to at least get a few wins on the board. I think once they get that first or second win over the board, they can get a few more. I don't think this is a team that is historically bad to the point where they should have 10, 12 wins this year. But it's still a very bad team. It's just not quite 2012 Bobcats bad.
Yeah, and I think even the fact they're bad shouldn't surprise many. Like, I think most of us, I thought they would maybe be a play-in team this year, like at the very bottom or like very close to. So that's like probably like a low 30 win team. And that's really like where they probably should be, maybe a little bit below it. But, being this bad, I don't think anybody could have expected it. I do think that this Pistons team should be better than the 2012 Bobcats. I think, granted, they were in like a lockout year, so they won like 7 games. I think in order to have a better win percentage, they would need to win like 9 games this year. The Pistons, 8 or 9 games for the Pistons. But I mean, like, come on. Like, I think they could get not only 10 games, I think they could probably end the year with like maybe 14 or 15 by the time like they start like getting things together. As you said, once they get that first win, I think they have the Spurs coming up. That might be like one of their better chances. I think they have Utah again. So unfortunately, they've already set the record for longest losing streak in a single season. So, any Pistons fans are going to have to hear that for like the rest of the time until someone else does it even worse or something like that. But yeah, I think like, as you said, like those guys you said on the Bobcats, Maggette, Kemba, Gerald Henderson, like maybe like Boris Diaw and stuff like that. Like that doesn't seem like a great team in itself when you think about like the time of that. If it was like prime Kemba and prime Corey Maggette, maybe that's a better team for sure. Well, it is a better team, but I don't know. I think like this Pistons team, it's just like a horrible fit. Like you said, there's not enough shooting. Granted, you added Bogdanovich back, so that helps out with that element, but there's just not enough shooting. You have too many bigs that would fit in like the previous era, guys like Wiseman and Bagley, maybe to an extent, even Isaiah Stewart. Like those are guys that would have benefited more so in an era against the Bobcats than an era like right now, and like you said, like Jalen Brunson, like he's been kind of in and out. He did come back recently, so that's good. Maybe they can finally get on the board and get a win. But yeah, I don't know. You got any other thoughts about this comparison?
All I'm going to say is the Pistons play the Raptors in their next game after the Celtics, and that would break the combined season single or loss record. I am very worried about that game because the Raptors are on the road and on the second night of a back-to-back. So please, Toronto, don't disappoint me.
I feel like it's scary to play the Pistons at this point because, like, you don't want to be that team that loses to them. I do think it's funny, though, that, like, of these two teams, they're historically bad. It's funny that both of them at one point were over 500 because the Bobcats won their first game of their season and the Pistons were 2-1 after Levine dropped 51 points against them and they still killed my Bulls. So it's just like a weird fact, like, but I don't know. If you want, though, we can move on. Talk about a little bit of something that we just saw last night. And, you know, I wasn't originally going to put this in here, but then I'm like, you know what? I'm throwing in the show last minute. And that's, you know, the Nets, they lost to the Bucks. Not a real big surprise. I think the big surprise, though, with that game, you know, they lost by like 22. Not like it was a blowout, but not like a super duper blowout. And especially wasn't after the first quarter when they were only down 1 point. Yet, you know, Jacque Vaughn benched Mikal Bridges after the first quarter. He benched Cam Thomas after the first quarter. You know, like all the starters, I think, except Dennis Smith Jr., played 15 minutes or less. And, you know, Royce O'Neal, 10 minutes. Day'Ron Sharpe, 16 minutes. Like, and I get it. Like, maybe there might be games where it's like, oh, someone's in foul trouble, and you look at that. But, like, benching all of your starters, especially when none of them were, really, except maybe you could argue Day'Ron Sharpe for the time he got. Like, none of them were in foul trouble, and it just seemed ugly to watch. And especially as a Nets fan, like, if I were a Nets fan, I would be mad to go to that game and see, like, oh, my guys played for 1 quarter, and then he took them out when it was still a game at that point. So what do you think of this coaching move? Because I don't really have much of an answer for it.
It was very bizarre. I mean, like you say, if you were, even as a viewer, it was weird, but if you were in the arena last night, you've got to feel cheated out of some money, man. It was so bizarre. I mean, there's a reason we're talking about this. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. I mean, we've seen Mikal check in for a minute and sub out to keep his streak going, but this was team-wide, and they had 4 or 5 other guys that they rested that didn't even play last night. But then to have that same thing with 4 out of your 5 starters, I mean, Mikal didn't play after the first quarter, nor did Cam Thomas, nor did Royce O'Neal, and Day'Ron Sharpe did not see the court in the second half. And at first, I was watching the second quarter, and I was like, okay, Jalen Wilson is in, Noah Clowney's in, the rest of the young guys are in. Like, okay, let's see what they do. And then, like, halfway through the second quarter comes around, and the only guy who's checked back in is Dennis Smith. It's like, okay, interesting rotations, but I guess they're still in the game, so maybe he's running with the young guys. And then there's like 3 or 4 minutes left in the first half, and it's like, okay, he's not bringing these guys back in, is he? And then, of course, second half rolls around, and no one other than Dennis Smith Jr. out of that starting lineup plays, and it's really bizarre. It's very, very bizarre. Now, I get it with how the league is setting up the way they feel and their rules about resting players right now, that if the Nets put out an 8 or 9 man preview from their availability last night pregame and said, we are resting all of these guys alongside Lonnie Walker and Ben Simmons being injured, I don't think they would have had enough players to field their 7-man roster that they legally would have had to have. But B, there would have been some comments coming down from the league, to say the least. But it's the second night of a back-to-back. I get not wanting to play your guys as strenuous of minutes, but, like, play them 25, 28 minutes if that's how you feel. You don't have to not play them after the first quarter. Or even if the game does get out of hand late, then pull the plug, which even still with these young guys being in it, didn't really get out of hand until the fourth quarter. But it was very bizarre. It felt very unfair to the fans in the stadium. It felt very unfair even as a viewer at home to think, okay, they're rolling out with some guys resting, but still a good enough team that should be able to compete. They showed that was the case through the first quarter. And then they were just like, yeah, we're done for the night. We're going to let the young guys play with a bunch of rookies and guys coming up from the G League. And to their credit, they did play well for the most part. But that's ultimately not the point here. The point is most fans in the arena did not show up to watch Noah Clowney. They probably wanted to watch Miles Bridges and Cam Thomas, and they just didn't get that. It felt very bizarre and very unfair.
Yeah, like, and my thing is too, and this isn't even the first time Jacque Vaughn has done this, because if you remember the game, I know that the game they played against Orlando, and Mikal Bridges had like a crazy first half, right? Like, he played, it felt like 14 minutes straight. You know, like if he wanted to like rest his guys, because he said after the game, he's like, you know, like he wants to make sure like nothing happened or anything like that. But it's like, you know, he's like said something like he wanted to protect his guys. Like, dude, anything could happen to any player at any time. So it's like, what are you even like thinking about there? And also like a guy like Mikal Bridges, like, he probably wasn't thinking, "Oh, I'm going to play 12 minutes tonight." Like he's played every game of his NBA career. He wants to be on the floor. So like I don't think he's, unless it's like the last game of the season and he's like, "Okay, yeah, maybe to keep my streak alive or something." But like we're still in the middle of the season. Like they're not even in a secured playoff spot or anything. Right now they're at ninth. So like assuming the play-in went how it would, they wouldn't even make the playoffs. So, like, I don't even get it, especially when, like, if you wanted to see these younger guys play, like, you just played Detroit twice. Why didn't you give them a chance against them? It felt like it really does the fans a disservice because, like, either you come watch us, like, beat the Pistons, or you're going to watch our JV squad go against the Milwaukee Bucks. Like, you can't win, essentially. Like, you're not going to see, like, a great game. You're either going to see us, take down a JV level team, or you're going to see us like put out our JV squad against an even better team. And I just didn't really understand it from that point. But he needs to stop like playing people such long stretches, because you'll see guys like maybe they'll have their starters play like 6 to 8 minute stretches at one point, then pull them for the last 4 minutes of a quarter. Then they sit the next 4 minutes, and then they play like the last 8 of the next quarter. Like, but playing them like literally a quarter full and then a little bit extra in some of these other games, and in this case, like Mikal Bridges just played like the full first quarter, and Cam Thomas all but like 5 seconds. Like, if he really wanted to like keep him rested, like why would he do that? That makes no sense. They're going to be so gassed. It's going to take them even longer to, catch their wind. So I don't know. I don't really agree with his coaching strategies much. And I don't know. I mean, he's been there. This is kind of his second season, basically second full season, because he took over like really early last season. Like, if he keeps it up, and especially if the Nets like don't make the playoffs, like he's probably going to be out of a job, and it might be hard for him to find a job again. Like, so I don't know. Like,
yeah, it's a weird one. Like, I like Jacque Vaughn for what he does for the most part, but these rotations are very bizarre. Like I said, it'd make a lot more sense even if you only wanted to give them like 6 minutes a quarter, and he wanted to play no one more than like 25, 26 minutes last night. That's fine. I get that. On back-to-backs, so be it, especially in a game that, although you shouldn't want to admit defeat in an NBA game, I get it against the Bucks if you're on a back-to-back, but to just be done after the first quarter and play those guys for the entire first quarter, it seems very bizarre and probably not a very good recipe for success long-term.
I think he should have at least played him like every quarter, except the fourth if the game was like out of hand by then, because it's like, okay, like we're not going to come back, it's over. But like at least play him like every quarter, like people could have just showed up, got tickets, were there for 30 minutes, and then said, okay, like let's leave or something, like it's I don't know. That kind of irritates me, and I'm not even a Nets fan, so I guess that tells you like right there. But yeah, I don't know. If you want, we can move on here to something more positive than Jacque Vaughn's toxic coaching the other night, and that is the mini game for the show, the NBA Fast Money mini game. So how this is going to work is, if you guys have seen Family Feud, at the end of the show, there's two people that go up. They have like 20 or 25 seconds, depending on if they go first or second. And they have to give an answer to 5 things that are based on survey answers that they think would be on the polls for the survey. And I'm going to give my guy Devin here 60 seconds, though, to answer 5 NBA-related things. If I don't specify between like current or former, then it could just be anything all time. Although I don't think for this one there's anything like that. I think everything is pretty specified for this one. But yeah, and your goal is to try and think like however the normal person would think, and just do your best. But if that makes sense.
Let's do it.
Alrighty, let me get the timer. I'll try to read quickly. If I do end up like taking too long to read something, I might give you a few extra seconds at the end. That hasn't happened yet, but just to make it fair. But all right, as soon as I count down, I'm going to start reading real fast, and we'll get started. So in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Give me a current NBA player born in Canada.
Andrew Wiggins.
Okay, give me a player who played on the We Believe Warriors squad.
Baron Davis.
Give me a team that didn't have an all-star last season.
Detroit Pistons.
Okay, give me a month that's the most entertaining part of the regular season.
March.
Okay, and give me a team that Austin Rivers played for.
The Clippers.
Okay, wow. You made pretty good time on that one, I must say. All right. I think you had like 30 seconds left. That might be the most time anyone's had. All right. So we're going to see how you did. So the first one, give me a current player born in Canada. You said Andrew Wiggins. That was a pretty good answer. That was number 3 on the board, only below SGA and Jamal Murray. And then obviously Wiggins. Guys like RJ Barrett was on there. Dylan Brooks, Ben Mathurin, Brandon Clark. And yeah, so you got a pretty good answer on that one. 17 points, not too shabby. But yeah, the second one, give me a player who played on the We Believe Warriors squad. You said Baron Davis. That got you 30 points on that one. So that was pretty good. Now you're at 47 points. Yeah, Monte Ellis was the closest one to that one. So
makes sense.
We also had Steven Jackson got some votes, Jason Richardson, Andres Biedrins, Al Harrington. So there were a lot of answers on there, but Baron Davis was number 1. So that was a good pull there. Number 3, give me a team that didn't have an all-star last season. You said the Detroit Pistons. I feel like that was a pretty safe route, and you still got a decent amount of points. You got 9 points for that one.
Okay.
That one was answer number 5. So number 1 last season was the Hawks. So yeah, because Trae Young didn't get in, but yeah, and then the Spurs were on there, the Magic were on there, the Rockets, Pistons, Hornets, Wizards. So yeah. Now give me a month that's the most entertaining part of the regular season. You said March. That got you only 5 points, unfortunately.
Tough.
Yeah. I feel like because that's like, it's like a weird time because that's like near the end of the year, but like it was, I think the reason it got so low is because April was also an answer on here, and that got like the votes for, I know exactly what you're thinking, like the playoff seeding, right?
Yeah.
So number 1 though is actually February, because like the trade deadline and the All-Star weekend and stuff like that.
That makes sense.
October was number 2. That's like the start. And then December, April, November, March, and January, unfortunately, which that's when my birthday is. So that's tough news. But anyways, you still got 5 points for that. And the last one, give me a team that Austin Rivers played for. You said the LA Clippers. That was the number 1 answer, and that got you 33 points. Big
Not too bad. The Andrew Wiggins one is definitely the one I'm kicking myself on.
Yeah, the Wiggins one was kind of tough. But I mean, like, honestly, like, if you think about it, like, they called him Maple Jordan, too.
This is true.
So, like, I think, like, if this was made, if I asked this, like, maybe, like, a couple years ago, Well, he definitely would get more than Shea, but I think he could also get more than Jamal Murray, even if like Jamal Murray was seen as like a more popular player or something like that. But the Clippers was number one for Austin Rivers, then the Pelicans, Rockets, Nuggets, Timberwolves, and then the Wizards and Knicks, which I'm assuming were Wizards and Knicks fans that voted because who else would remember him on the Wizards or the Knicks?
Definitely not me, that's for sure.
Even really the Timberwolves, but I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, that's Jelson's vote.
that was jealous. He stuffed the ballot there. But yeah, and it was the last team he played on, I guess. But yeah, so overall though, you still got 94 points. That's not too shabby. I think that's in the top half somewhere of finishes. I don't think that's the top one, but that is in the top half. I'm pretty sure. So how do you feel about your performance?
Feel pretty good. Definitely kicking myself on the Wiggins one as the Canadian, but I'll still take it. 2 number ones on the board. I can live with that.
I had to give you the Canada one because I'm like that's his thing. I was thinking about giving you a Raptors one too, but who knows? Maybe that'll be on another day.
Definitely.
But yeah, overall, I mean, I thought it was a good performance, and overall, I think it was a good show. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching. You got any other final thoughts before we close this one out?
Nothing else to add. Thanks for having me on. And if you guys haven't yet, hit that like button and do subscribe.
Yes, sir. I'll have all his stuff down below. And yeah, hopefully you guys have a good new year, because this is going to be like the last show of 2023. It's kind of sad, but time flies. You got to move on. But anyways, again, hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching, and we're out. Peace.